Hello again. Thanks for stopping by Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode number 69, and we have Downey Games Fast Action Racing on the table for a continuation of the 1991 stock car project. We are at race 9, which took place at Talladega on May 6th, 1991. It was known as the Winston 500, and on that day in 91, Ernie Irvan was the pole sitter, and Harry Gant was the winner of the race. So Talladega is a 2.66 mile tri-oval, and modifications at this track, both contact and mechanical, are a +1. So before we set the field, let's take a look at the standings coming into this race. After race 8, we see Kyle Petty is still hanging on to the points lead, and he's followed by Bobby Hamilton and Harry Gant, both at 201 points. Hamilton gets the nod based on his 6 top 10 finishes, and the rest of the top 10 is Davey Allison, Rick Mast, Alan Kowicki, Morgan Shepherd, Ernie Irvan, Rusty Wallace, and Brett Bodine. And we're keeping an eye on Dale Earnhardt, who was the real-life champion in 1991. He was making his move up, had got as high as 12th, and had some bad luck last race, and now he's down to 20th. So we'll keep an eye on him going forward. So we're going to set the field, and I'm going to give the driver cards a shuffle and a cut and put them on this grid. And once again, I'll mention that this grid is not a representation of position on the track, but rather an abstraction of various grooves and interactions between cars that are near each other is the best way I could describe it. All right, so we've given the deck a shuffle, and give it a cut, and we'll get the drivers out on the field. Okay, so first we have Dale Jarrett. Looks like I need to move that up a little bit. Dale Jarrett, Dale Earnhardt, Dave Marcus, Davey Allison, Jeff Bodine, Sterling Marlin, Ted Musgrave, one of the rookies, Hut Strickland, Darrell Waltrip, Joe Rootman, Rusty Wallace, Mark Martin, Terry Labonte, Harry Gant, Ken Schrader, Ernie Irvan, Bill Elliott, and Stanley Smith. Before I go on, I wanted to mention Ken Schrader. He has 2 wins. But unfortunately, even with those 2 wins, he is in 26th place. 87 points behind leader Kyle Petty. All right, so we'll continue on here. Mickey Gibbs, Jimmy Spencer, Jimmy Means, Larry Pearson, Bobby Hillen Jr., Ricky Rudd, Rick Mast, Bobby Hamilton, the other rookie, Morgan Shepherd, Michael Waltrip, Chad Little, Rick Wilson, Brett Bodine, Alan Kowicki, points leader Kyle Petty, Lake Speed, Richard Petty, and Derek Cope. All right, so we have the field set. First thing we're going to do is we're going to roll 2 dice, the red and the black die. We're going to read the red die first, or excuse me, the white die first, and we're going to determine who the pole sitter is. So there's a little area on the card, like for example, Jeff Bodine. This block here that says 45 and 46, he would be the pole sitter with that number. All right, so we get a 43. And that's Alan Kowicki. 41 to 44, Alan Kowicki. So I'll use this green die as a leader marker. We'll put that on Alan Kowicki. and he is going to face a challenge. So he brings them out. You know, they may have run a few laps, and he's going to face a challenge from 45, Rick Wilson. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the green race ratings. For this first check only, the pole sitter gets a +1. So Alan Kowicki's a 12, Rick Wilson is an 8. That is he's challenging at a -4. He needs an 11 or 12 to be successful. He rolls a 6 and fails. It remains on the lead lap. So that's a fail. And Kowicki is the race leader. Okay, so we are in phase 1, and that is a mechanical check. So we're going to select a random driver, 4 adjacent, and we will be looking at the red mechanical problem avoidance number. Okay, and we get a 31, and that's going to be Ted Musgrave down here. Right there. All right, so it's Musgrave. His 12 o'clock is Rick Mast. His 3 o'clock is Michael Waltrip. His 6 o'clock wraps around to the top, and it's Morgan Shepherd. And his 9 o'clock is Larry Pearson. Okay, and here at Talladega, mechanical checks get a +1. So we're going to roll the die for all of these drivers, starting with Ted Musgrave. If he's equal to his mechanical rating, he'll get a red lap marker, meaning he's had a mechanical issue, had to come in, got back out on the track, and he's many laps down. And if the die reading is greater than his mechanical rating, he'll be forced to retire. All right, so first up is Ted Musgrave. He's a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 9, so he is going to get a red lap marker, Ted Musgrave. So he fails. He's red. Next is Rick Mast. He's a 7. He becomes an 8 here at Talladega. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 5 and passes. Next is Michael Waltrip. He's a 7. That becomes an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 9, and he is forced to retire. All right, so Waltrip fails. Did not finish. All right, next would be Morgan Shepherd. He is a 6. He becomes a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 7. So he has equaled his contact avoidance, and he fails and goes many laps down. So Shepherd fails, red lap marker. And the last check will be Larry Pearson. His mechanical avoidance number is a 6. That becomes a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 7, and he's forced to retire. So we lost 2 drivers due to mechanical issues, Michael Waltrip and Larry Pearson. So he failed, did not finish. And the race leader remains Alan Kowicki, because he could have been involved in this if he had been randomly selected. All right, so he's going to face another challenge as we finish up phase 1. All right, and that challenge is coming from 36. It's Morgan Shepherd. He's down several laps. He can't challenge. If he was only down 1 lap with a green lap marker, he could challenge to get back on the lead lap. So we'll roll again, and we have a 31. And we get Ted Musgrave, who's also in the same situation as Morgan Shepherd. We'll roll again. We get an 11, and that's going to be Dale Jarrett. So Dale Jarrett's going to challenge for the lead. And We look at the green race rating and use the quality pass matrix. So Alan Kowicki's an 11, Dale Jarrett's a 10. He's challenging at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 9, so we have a new race leader in Dale Jarrett. All right, so we'll move the marker to Jarrett. And now phase 2 is a period of green flag racing. So what we do is we select a random driver, the 4 adjacent, and they are going to go up against Dale Jarrett, the new leader, using the quality pass matrix. If the lead changes, the remaining checks will go against the new leader. So first we'll check, and we get a 14, and that's going to be the pride of Berwick, PA, Jimmy Spencer. Okay. His 12 o'clock is Dave Marcus. His 3 o'clock is Jeffrey Bodine. 6 o'clock is Dale Earnhardt. And his 9 o'clock wraps all the way around, and it's Bill Elliott. Okay, so first check comes up against Jimmy Spencer. Spencer is an 8. Dale Jarrett's a 10. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He gets a 10, and we have a new race leader in Jimmy Spencer. So he passes. Spencer is a new race leader. Okay, so now Dave Marcus will challenge Jimmy Spencer. Marcus is a 6, Spencer is an 8. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails, but remains on the lead lap. So he fails. Jimmy Spencer continues to be the race leader. Next up is Jeff Bodine. He's an 11. Spencer is an 8. He's challenging at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12 to take the lead. And he rolls a 3 and fails. And Spencer remains the race leader. Now he's going to face Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt's an 11, Spencer's an 8. Challenging at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12. And he rolls a 10. Excuse me, and we have a new race leader in Dale Earnhardt. Okay, and the final challenge is going to come from Bill Elliott. They're both 11s, Earnhardt and Elliott. He's challenging at a 0. Bill Elliott needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6 and fails, but remains on the lead lap. And Dale Earnhardt remains the race leader. Now we're into phase 3. The first part of phase 3 is pit stops during green flag. So this is a series of green flag pit stops. Do a random driver and 4 adjacent, just like the last phase, and they're all going to go up against the leader. So we could have several lead changes here, like you would see in a real race during green flag pit stops. So first we have to select that driver and the 4 random, and it's a 45, and that'll be Rick Wilson. So it's Wilson. His 12 o'clock is Mark Martin. His 3 o'clock is Kent Schrader. 6 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. And his 9 o'clock is Darrell Waltrip. Okay, and all of these challenges, at least for right now, are going up against the race leader, Dale Earnhardt. So the first one comes from Rick Wilson. Wilson's an 8, Earnhardt's an 11. He's challenging at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls an 8 and fails. Dale Earnhardt remains the leader. All right, next check. It's Mark Martin. Martin's an 11, Earnhardt's an 11. Challenging at a 0. Martin needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 9, and we have a new race leader in Mark Martin. So Martin passes, and he's the new race leader. Okay, he's facing a challenge from Ken Schrader. They're both 11s. So this is at a 0. Schrader needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6 and fails. So Mark Martin remains the leader. Next, Rusty Wallace. Wallace and Martin are both 11s. Challenge is at 0. Wallace needs a 7 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 7, and we have a new race leader in Rusty Wallace. So as you can see, there's several lead changes going on during these green flag pit stops. So Wallace passes. He's the new race leader. And the final challenge is coming from Darrell Waltrip up against Rusty Wallace. They're both 11s. Challenge is at a 0. And Waltrip needs a 7 to 12 to be successful. He rolls snake eyes and fails. And so the new leader, or the leader, remains Rusty Wallace. As we head into the second part of phase 3, and this is a check for penalties. So we're going to check to see during these green flag pit stops if there were any pit crew infractions that would cause a driver to have to come in and do it stop and go. So we're going to select a random driver, and for Jason, we're going to be looking at the blue pit crew rating. So the random driver is 32. 32 is Rick Mast. So it's Mast. Is 12 o'clock is Hut Strickland. Okay. His 3 o'clock is Joe Rootman. 6 o'clock is Ted Musgrave, and Ted Musgrave has a red lap marker. I'll explain that when we get to him. So it's Musgrave. And his 9 o'clock is Davey Allison. Okay, so we're checking against the blue pit crew number. If the die is lower or equal to his pit crew number, it's good. If it's higher, he's forced to come in for a stop and go, and goes 1 lap down, so he'll get a green lap marker. Okay, so Rick Mast needs an 8 or less. His number's an 8. He rolls an 8, so no infraction for him. He passes. Next up is Hut Strickland. Strickland is also an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 6 and is successful. Joe Rootman is also an 8, so he needs an 8 or less. He rolls an 8. He's also successful. So far, so good with the pit crews. All right, next is Ted Musgrave. Now, he has a red lap marker, and the rules state if you are part of this check during a red lap marker, you are black flagged and removed from the race. So Ted Musgrave is gone. And that's a fail. DNF. Black flag. Okay, and the last check would be against Davey Allison. He's an 8. His pit crew is that is. And he needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 4 and is successful. So everyone passed other than Ted Musgrave. And Rusty Wallace, who was not involved, remains the race leader. Now, at the end of phase 3 and the beginning of phase 4 is going to be 2 challenges. So we're going to get to those right now. The first challenge is going to come from 16, Jimmy Means. Okay, well, Rusty Wallace is an 11, Jimmy Means is a 2. That's an automatic failure, and because it's the difference is -9, and because it's greater than -5, Jimmy Means automatically goes a lap down. He wasn't challenging for the lead. He was trying to stay on the lead lap. So it's a fail, a green lap marker. And Rusty Wallace remains the leader. Now into phase 4, Rusty Wallace is going to face a challenge right at the top of the phase. Now that is a 34. That's Bobby Hamilton. Okay, Bobby Hamilton's a 10. Rusty Wallace is an 11. He's challenging at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls an 8, and we have a new race leader in rookie Bobby Hamilton. So it passes. Hamilton is the race leader. Okay. Now we're going to check if there was any contact. We're in phase 4 now. Okay, so we will select a random driver and for adjacent, and we'll see if anybody is involved in any contact. So the random driver is 41. There is nobody there at 41. So we'll roll again, and we get a 64. And that's Bill Elliott. So it's Bill Elliott. His 12 o'clock is Derek Cope. His 3 o'clock wraps around to Jimmy Spencer. His 6 o'clock is Richard Petty. And his 9 o'clock is Alan Kulwicki. All right, so we are looking at the yellow contact avoidance number. Here at Talladega, it's a +1, so they will get a 1 added to their contact rating. And if the roll is lower than their contact rating, they're safe. If it's equal to, they get a yellow lap marker, which means they were involved in some kind of contact, had to come in, got back out, but they're several laps down, but not as many laps down as a red lap marker driver would be, okay? And if the die is greater, the contact was bad enough that, the die roll, the contact was bad enough that the driver had to retire. Okay, so first, it's going to be Bill Elliott. Now remember, it's a +1 here. Well, Elliott's an 11. That makes him a 12. The worst he can do is get a yellow lap marker, and that would be with boxcars. He rolls a 4, so he's safe. So Elliott passes. Next would be Derek Cope. Cope is a 6, makes him a 7. He needs a 6 or less to be safe. He rolls an 11. He's forced to retire. So his contact was severe. It's a failure, DNF. Okay, next would be Jimmy Spencer. Spencer is a 7. He becomes an 8. He needs a 7 or less to be safe. He rolls a 7, and he's safe. He passes. Next is Richard Petty. Richard Petty is an 8. He becomes a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 5. He's safe. He also passes. And the last check is Alan Kulwicki. He's an 8. He becomes a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 7 and is good. So the only person who was involved with some contact, and I guess it was against the wall, would have been Derek Cope, and he was forced to retire. So after all of that, Bobby Hamilton remains the leader. Now, since we did have contact, we are going to have pit stops under caution. And this would be the leader. It's going to go up against a random driver and 4 adjacent. Okay, so, and we will once again look at the pit crew rating, the blue number, and use the quality pass matrix. All right, so the random driver is 55, and that's Ken Schrader. So it's Schrader. There's also going to be 1 random driver here. So we got Schrader, Kyle Petty's his 12. His 3 o'clock goes over to Dave Marcus. His 6 o'clock is Alan Kulwicki. And his 9 o'clock is Rick Wilson. I stand corrected. There is no random driver in this. It's just the... there's no extra random driver. It is... Hold on. Nope, I got this wrong. It's the race leader and a random driver +1. A race leader and his adjacent drivers +1 random driver. I apologize. So Ken Schrader would be the random driver. So the first driver is going to be Bobby Hamilton. Darrell Waltrip is 12 o'clock. Apologize for that. Rusty Wallace is 3 o'clock. And Rusty Wallace is 3 o'clock. Hut Strickland is 6 o'clock. And Jeff Bodine is 9 o'clock. And as we said, Ken Schrader is the random driver. Okay, so the first check is Darrell Waltrip. And we're looking at the pit crew rating. Bobby Hamilton's an 8. Darrell Waltrip's an 8. He's challenging at a 0. Needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7. Darrell Waltrip's now the race leader. So Darrell Waltrip passes. Next is Rusty Wallace. Rusty Wallace is an 8. Waltrip's an 8. Challenging at 0. Needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 10. Rusty Wallace is the race leader. Remember, these are during pit stops, so we may get several lead changes. All right, Hut Strickland is the next check. And where is Hut? I lost him. Here he is. He's an 8. Wallace is an 8. Challenging at 0 again. Needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 9. He takes the lead coming out of the pits. All right. And Jeff Bodine. Jeff Bodine is an 8. Strickland's an 8. Challenging at a 0. Needs a 7 to 12. Rolls an 11. And Jeffrey Bodine is now leading the race. And he's going to face a challenge from the random driver, which is Ken Schrader. They're both 8s. Schrader's challenging at a 0. Needs a 7 to 12. Rolls a 3 and fails. So that's a failure. And Jeff Bodine is the race leader. As we finish up phase 4, there's another challenge. So I'll randomly select a driver, and it is a 13, and it's going to be Dale Earnhardt. All right. They're both 11s. So Earnhardt's challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8, and he's the leader once again. So Earnhardt passes and is the leader. Okay, now we are in the closing lap action, the final phase. First thing we're going to do is check to see if we are going to have another mechanical check. Now, according to Talladega's card, the last highlight event table, we'll have a mechanical check on a roll of 8 to 12. We roll a 3, so that does not happen. So that's no. Okay, next part of the closing lap phase is a challenge. So, and if there was a mechanical check, it would have only been the leader. So that was no, and Earnhardt remains the leader. Now he's going to face a challenge, and that comes from 26. That comes from Sterling Marlin. Marlin is an 11. Dale Earnhardt's an 11. Challenge is at 0. Sterling Marlin needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls an 11. New leader, Sterling Marlin. Passes. Marlin is the new leader. All right, now we're going to see if there's any contact check. So we got a roll looking at the last highlight event table, and once again, it's an 8 to 12. We roll a 6, so there's no contact. So we skip that phase, and Sterling Marlin remains the race leader. Now we have pit crew stops under caution. Well, we didn't have any contact, so this phase is also NA, and Sterling Marlin remains the leader. Now he's going to face another challenge. So we're winding down here. We're down to this challenge. So select a random driver. Sterling Marlin's facing a challenge from Ken Schrader. Okay, Schrader is an 11, Marlin's an 11. Once again, challenging at a 0. So Ken Schrader needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7 and takes the lead. So Schrader passes, and he's the new leader. Okay, now we check to see if we're going to do a pit crew check. Now it says event void if pit stop under caution have taken place. They did not because we didn't have any contact. So we're going to see if we have a pit crew check. And on a 7 to 12 here at Talladega, we will conduct another pit crew check. 7 to 12. We roll a 6. So we avoid that phase as well. And Ken Schrader remains the leader. Now, the last part of this is to check to see if there's going to be any more green flag racing. According to the last highlight event table at Talladega, on a roll of 6 to 12, there will be a final phase of green flag racing. We roll a 7, and that's a yes. So we check the adjacent cars. They can't be lapped. Cars adjacent to the leader and one random driver, and they're all going to go up against the leader. And then we're coming down to the end here. So it's going to be Kyle Petty. It's the first check. Or excuse me, the 12 o'clock. Ken Schrader's 3 o'clock wraps around to Dave Marcus. His 6 o'clock is Alan Kowicki. His 9 o'clock is Rick Wilson. And one random driver. And that random driver is 56. It's Kyle Petty. He's already in this. 35. Darrell Waltrip. Okay. So they're all going up against Schrader. First is Kyle Petty. They're both 11s. Petty's challenging at a 0. Needs a 7 to 12. Rolls an 8. Kyle Petty's the leader. Petty passes. Takes the lead. Okay, now Dave Marcus is a 6. Kyle Petty is an 11. That's a -5. That's an automatic failure. But because it's not greater than -5, in other words, -6, Marcus stays on the lead lap. But he does fail. Kyle Petty remains the race leader. Now it's Alan Kowicki. Kowicki's an 11. Kyle Petty's an 11. Challenge once again is at a 0. Kowicki needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 10. Kowicki becomes the race leader. Next check is against Rick Wilson. Wilson is an 8. Alan Kowicki's an 11. Wilson's challenging at a -3. Needs a 10 to 12. He rolls an 11. Takes the lead. Whoops. You're not Rick Wilson. You are. All right. So unlikely, but Rick Wilson does pass and take the lead. And now he's going to face the final challenge, which was the random driver. And that's Darrell Waltrip. Well, Waltrip's an 11. Wilson's an 8. Waltrip is challenging at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12. He rolls an 11, and your new race leader is Darrell Waltrip. And it's Waltrip. Darrell, who now has the lead. Okay, so we are down to the last challenge. Final challenge. I don't know if you can see that, but it's the challenge right down here at the bottom of the page. And the way we determine the final challenge is we check the adjacent drivers to the leader. No lap cars can be involved, and whoever has the highest rating using the rules of priority will take on the leader for the final challenge. All right. So the 12 o'clock can't be Morgan Shepherd because he's got a red lap marker. So it wraps around to Rick Mast. He's a 9. Rick Wilson is an 8. So far it's Rick Mast. Bobby Hamilton's a 10. But Ricky Rudd's an 11. So the final challenge is going to come from Ricky Rudd. So down to the last few laps, and it's these two guys going at it back and forth. And as they come to the finish line, we're going to see who the winner is. Okay, so they're both 11s. Ricky Rudd is challenging at a 0, needs a 7 to 12. Rolls a 7 and just noses Darrell Waltrip as the checkered flag is flying, and they pass it. And your winner of the Winston 500 at Talladega on May 6, 1991 in a replay is Ricky Rudd. All right, so now we get to the fun part, or what I call the fun part. We're going to determine the field, the finishing. All right, so we know Ricky Rudd won the race. So we're going to take him off the track. We're going to put that marker back there. And the driver that lost that final challenge finishes second. So that's Darrell Waltrip. Now we go around where the challenge came from, and we check those adjacent drivers and remove them based on race rating using the rules of priority. So it was Rick Mast with a 9, Rick Wilson with an 8, Bobby Hamilton. So he would be next. Then it would be Rick Mast, because remember, Morgan Shepherd wasn't in it, so we wrapped around the Rick Mast. And then Rick Wilson. Okay. So now the next part is we go around the groove that the winner was in, and that's the middle groove here. You can see the darker color in the center. These 4 squares or rectangles are the center groove, or top, I think. This is the middle groove and this is the bottom groove, or vice versa. I don't remember. So we're staying in the groove of the winner. So that's this groove here, and we go clockwise and remove the cards based on race rating. Well, Ken Schrader's an 11. He's next. So then Alan Kulwicki, Harry Gant, Brett Bodine's a 9. Davey Allison, he's an 11. Jeff Bodine is an 11. All right, so now we go back around looking for 10s. 9. Bobby Hillin Jr. is a 10. Going around for 9s clockwise, it would be Brett Bodine and Joe Rootman. Okay, so now we've cleared the groove that the winner was in, the middle groove. So the rules state when you move to the next groove, you always move to the center groove if possible. So both grooves are adjacent, but we will move to the center groove. And we move in where the leader was, or where the winner was. So we start here and we go clockwise. So it's going to be Rusty Wallace, Hut Strickland's an 11, and Chad Little, who's the 8. Now we move out to the outer groove. And we do that in the closest square to the leader. So that's going to be starting at Sterling Marlin. He's an 11. Mark Martin's an 11. Kyle Petty's an 11. Bill Elliott's an 11. Ernie Irvin is an 11. Dale Earnhardt is an 11. And that's it for the 11. So now we're going to look for 10s. Terry Labonte's a 10. Dale Jarrett is also a 10. Now 9s. There's no 9s. 8s. Richard Petty, Mickey Gibbs, Jimmy Spencer. 7s. No 7s. 6s. Be Lake Speed, Dave Marcus. And we have 3 cars left. 2 of them are lapped. That means Stanley Smith with his 2 goes next. Then it would be Jimmy Means, who was 1 lap down. Then Morgan Shepherd, who was many laps down, goes to the bottom of the pile. And then lastly, we take the drivers who did not finish and add them to the bottom of the pile. And your top 10 for the Winston 500 at Talladega in a replay on May 6, 1991. Ricky Rudd is the winner. Darrell Waltrip, Bobby Hamilton, Rick Mast, and Rick Wilson are your top 5. And then to round out the top 10, you have Ken Schrader, Alan Kowicki, Harry Gant, Davey Allison, and Brett Bodine. Excuse me. Sorry, Jeff. Keep wanting to give it to your brother, Jeff Bodine. So there you have the top 10 here on this replay of the 1991 stock car season at Talladega, race number 9. The Winston 500 took place on May 6, 1991. Your winner is Ricky Rudd. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you stuck to the end, I appreciate it and admire your patience. And I'll be back again in the near future with another video. And until then, take care.